Reaction pouring in across the country after both candidates took the stage one last time to pitch themselves to the American people. Our correspondents have been hanging out with voters, watching the presidential debates with some key demos. MSNBC senior national correspondent Chris Jansing is with young black female voters in Atlanta, Georgia. NBC News Now correspondent Dasha Burns is back in Beaver County, Pennsylvania, talking with Democrats and Republicans whose votes don't exactly line up with their party affiliation. And NBC News correspondent Rahema Ellis is with first-time voters on Long Island. Let's start in Georgia. Nearly 2 million people have already voted in the state. That's a 130% increase compared to this time back in 2016. But with just 11 days until the election, Georgia still has some undecided voters. Chris watched the final debate with 3 women from Atlanta, all looking for a candidate to help them make up their minds.
They definitely brought more energy.
I thought it was a lot better. I thought that she did a phenomenal job. Biden, to me, looked more presidential than he did in the last debate.
He was in it. He was in the debate like a real president.
I did appreciate that mute button.
That mute button was great.
It was great. And he knew, after he got muted, he knew that she meant business.
I appreciated the fact that Biden acknowledged that systemic racism does exist.
This was the first time that I've seen Biden acknowledge any type of responsibility, and this is one of the first times that I've heard any presidential candidate talk about the talk.
Are you ready to vote now?
I am ready to vote.
For?
Biden.
I'm going to decide after I've done every shred of research that I can do.
So are you moved to vote now for someone?
I'm going to wait till the fact checkers do their job tomorrow. As of right now, tonight, I am not moved.
Chris joins us now from Atlanta. Chris, you watched the debate with those women last night. What moments or issues got the biggest reaction from them?
Yeah, I think, you listened yesterday as they told us what they wanted to hear from them last night. And look, the crime bill in 1994 that led to the mass incarceration of so many young black men was so heavily on their minds. It's probably what they talked about most. And they really were impressed by the fact that the former vice president talked about that, much more impressed with his answer to the question about black parents having to have the talk with their children than they were with Donald Trump's. And I think overall they were looking for a more aggressive, definitely a more aggressive former vice president, and they feel like they got that. One of the things that they actually had a very light moment about was the mute button. They thought the mute button worked great, that in the end they learned a lot more. Did they get the answer to all of their questions? No, but they really felt like this was a debate, as I think most Americans did, where it actually was a debate, where you got to hear both sides, and where they feel like they walked away better informed and ready, as you heard at the end of that, to go and to be able to research a little more before some of them will make their decisions.
Chris, I have to agree with them. I think the mute button Kristen Welker combo was just unstoppable last night.
Amazing.
We heard Renisha say there that she's right. I mean, Kristen was something else. We heard Renisha say there that she's ready to vote for Biden. What was missing for Shar and Janice?
I think there's a couple of things. One is they're very concerned about his economic policy. If there's one thing that many of these younger black voters who are not taken with Biden tell me is that the opportunity zones, for example, some of the other things that the president has done to help black entrepreneurs has been very important to them. Maybe you saw that the most Googled thing during the debate last night was the $15 minimum wage, and all of them have been some variety of entrepreneur in their life, and they had quite a long conversation off camera about the idea that $15 in Atlanta is different than $15 in New York City or Los Angeles or Peoria, and their question was, do we need a $15 minimum wage? It was something that they wanted to look further into. So not all the questions that they had got answered, but they certainly got their interest piqued in some of the things and had their concerns allayed in others.
Chris, you're in Atlanta. Atlanta's Democratic Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms was on Morning Joe today with a warning for voters. Take a listen.
The question that remains to be seen are all of these early voters, people who were going to vote anyway, and they've just shown up early. And what I've said repeatedly is just to remind people not to fall for what happened in 2016, where we thought we had it in the bag and people thought their votes didn't matter. Every vote counts. We still need people to show up.
Chris, people certainly are showing up to vote in Georgia. What else can you tell us about the high voter turnout there?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're right around 2 million, maybe even a little more. They think they could smash all previous records and hit 5 million eventually. I can tell you we were at a polling place yesterday, and they have these drop-off boxes for people who are nervous about whether the mail is actually going to get their ballot in. And so they brought them by hand to this library where we were. All of that tells you the interest here. And if anyone had said to me 6 months ago that 11 days before the election I'd be standing in Georgia, I would have thought you were crazy. But this is a dead-even race. Yesterday I mentioned that a recent poll had it at 45-45. There's now a more recent poll, Allison, at 49-49, which tells you just how few of those true undecideds are left and how it could really turn things, which is why Kamala Harris is here right now. She's talking to students at an HBCU. She's going to do one of her drive-in events later. But again, toward the end of a campaign, the most valuable commodity any campaign has is its candidates. And she's here in Georgia today. Allison?
Chris, you said it. There are few undecided voters in Georgia, but somehow you managed to find them, and they had great perspectives. Thank you so much for sharing them with us.
Thanks.
Pennsylvania, an important state this election. If the Trump campaign can't pull off a win there, its chances of hitting 270 electoral votes drop dramatically. That's why our very own Dasha Burns has been spending so much time in Beaver County, right outside Pittsburgh, for our County to County series. Beaver used to be a Democratic stronghold, but Republicans have won here by increasing margins over the last 3 elections. In fact, Donald Trump took the county by almost 20 points in 2016. Dasha joins us now from Beaver. Dasha, let's talk about the dynamics there in Beaver and the voters you've spoken with, several Democrats and Republicans with different issues this election. Tell us about this county and those voters.
Hey, Allison, you set that up so nicely. This is a fascinating place because when Donald Trump won here in 2016, there were about 20,000 more registered Democrats in this county than there were Republicans. And as you mentioned, this was once a Democratic stronghold. You used to find a lot of blue-collar Democrats here, most of them working in the steel industry. That industry left, and since then, Republicans have been doing better and better in this county. And in 2016, there were a lot of Democratic voters, folks who voted for Obama and then said, you know what, we're going to give this other guy a chance. And so today I had a very interesting lineup of voters. I spoke to 2 lifelong Democrats who voted for Donald Trump in 2016, have since re-registered as Republicans, plan to vote for him again. I also met a Democrat who voted for Trump, who is not planning to vote for him again, and a Republican, a lifelong Republican who is voting for Joe Biden and has recently re-registered as a Democrat. So party lines are very muddled here in Allison. This is reflective of what I've been hearing across the country, frankly. There are a lot of folks right now that don't feel at home in their parties. And the question here is, Joe Biden is not going to win Beaver County. It's very, very unlikely. But can he eat into the margins here enough, win back some of those Democrats and maybe win over some Republicans to eat into the margins enough and help him out in the state overall? Allison?
Dasha, it is so fascinating to hear you explain how people have voted, how they're switching, what their concerns are. Let's talk about how those voters viewed the debate last night. The American public watched a real debate on real issues yesterday. You could actually hear what the candidates had to say. What are those voters in Beaver County saying about the debate this evening?
Yeah, Allison, the other thing that was audible was a sigh of relief from both Biden and from Trump supporters, just hearing something civil, hearing some real substance. Both Biden and Trump supporters I talked to were just happy to have, as you said, a real debate. Take a listen to just some of the takeaways from the voters I talked to today.
I thought that that Donald Trump did excellent. He offered a lot of hope, which we don't see that very often. Everything that he said, he talks about all of the positive things that he's done.
I thought last night was much more civil, and I didn't see a whole lot of difference, though, in the content from our president. He continued to misconstrue the truth. I'll be nice and say it that way. I thought the vice president did very well considering all that. I was pleasantly surprised that there were no real attacks on his family like I expected there to be. Overall, I thought it was very positive.
Allison, one point of agreement across all of the voters that I talked to today was that our colleague Kristen Welker did a phenomenal job. They were very impressed with how she handled this and allowed them to hear what these candidates actually have to say on the issues. Allison?
Dasha, I think that is the one thing Democrats, Republicans, independents, unaffiliated, whatever your party affiliation is, I think everyone is in agreement that Kristen just did a terrific job. I know all of us are so proud of her. It was wonderful to watch. Let me ask you about one more big issue there in Beaver County, natural gas and fracking. What are folks there saying about how President Trump and Joe Biden have addressed those issues, which are so important to them?
Yeah, this is huge here, and it did come up in a big way last night. We talked about how the steel industry left this town and left this community pretty hard hit. Well, a lot of folks credit some of the resurgence that we've seen here recently to the gas and fracking industry. In fact, just down the road here, there is a major Shell ethane cracker plant being built that is bringing thousands of jobs to this area and is giving a big boost to the local businesses here on this main strip in Beaver. And so this hit home for a lot of folks I talked to. I want you to hear from Katie Lashane. She worked in oil and gas for about 10 years. Here's how she viewed some of what she heard on this topic last night. Listen.
When Biden had mentioned that he wanted to phase out oil and gas, I think that was a big one for me. And to hear him voice his opinions on the energy industry and how he wants to be zero emissions, all I can think about is that is going to cost the taxpayers, and that is going to hit home harder for the middle class.
And Allison, I did talk to Biden supporters about this as well, who like his position on energy, but even they said that he needs to be much more clear about where he stands, especially on the issue of fracking, that he does not plan to ban fracking. He really needs to clarify that to voters here in Western Pennsylvania. Allison?
All right, Dasha Burns reporting for us from Beaver County once again. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Allison.
Did the final debate do anything to swing first-time voters? NBC News correspondent Rahema Ellis spent the evening at Stony Brook University on Long Island watching the debate with some undecided students there. Rahema joins me now from Stony Brook. You spoke with a number of students last night. What did they think of the debate? What was their overall impression?
For these first-time voters, they're in a presidential election, Allison, their overall impression is what you've been hearing from some others so far in this segment, and that is they were pleased that it was a lot more civil. These students were saying that they wanted civility between the two men who are vying for the highest elected office in the country, and they were glad that they got it. For them, while we are on a college campus, this is not just an academic exercise for them because the pandemic is affecting them as well. We're all required to wear masks. And while colleges are designed for academics and socializing, they're also required to social distance themselves. And they wanted to hear from the candidates about what they might do in order to bring their lives back to normal. It was not about entertainment. It was about a clear purpose that these students had when they watched this debate. Take a listen.
Last debate was very, uncomfortable for me watching as a citizen. This one, I cannot say completely comfortable, but I did get some clearer answers. Not completely satisfied with the answers that I did hear, but it definitely did not sway my election decision.
I felt the format was much cleaner in a way compared to the first debate. There was less talking over on both sides and interruptions. I appreciated that. And I would say I feel like the policies really came through in this debate, even more so from the first debate.
And Allison, I have to tell you, it's a trifecta here because students were also saying that they liked the fact that there was a mute button. It gave them an opportunity to hear the candidates express their opinions and ideas and policy positions or not. And they also, as everyone has been pointing out, love the fact that Kristen Welker did a excellent job. Allison?
We just keep saying what a winning combination. Kristen and that mute button, you just can't beat it. Rahima, did the debate help any students make up their minds? I know they're still trying to figure out what they're going to do. Has anyone decided after last night?
Well, there were a few people we talked to who were leaning in a particular direction. Very few people said they were totally undecided. But the debate was meaningful for them in terms of, again, they wanted to hear issues, and issues were talked about. The pandemic, race relations, national security. One student said he wanted to hear a little more on foreign policy. But nonetheless, listen to what they said about how much the debate impacted how they will actually vote.
Definitely sealed it. Trump wants to open up the country. That's essential. We can't keep ourselves closed in any longer. And he said that, and I agree with him.
I believe that I made the right decision in the way that I casted my vote, because Biden really came at this debate with facts and with actual policy issues whenever he was able to kind of, talk about it. And Trump kind of came with a lot of sensationalism.
So we're talking about people who are between 18 and 23 years old, Gen Z, and it should be noted that there's something like 23 million eligible Gen Z voters for this presidential election. That's a whopping 16 million more of them than in 2016. They're excited, they're engaged, they're enthusiastic. But the young man whom you just saw there, Huntley, he said, he's a political science student. He said what he hopes will happen is that they will also be engaged enough to actually go to the polls, because there's a lot of talk. Now they want to see it put in action, because at this point, senior citizens still tend to outvote younger voters. Allison?
Those younger voters are a strong and an important voting bloc. We certainly hope they will go to the polls. Rahima Ellis on Long Island, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.